Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to episode 29 of Mythos Busters, where, God, I just missed you guys so much. I'm so glad to be back. I swear that's genuine. With me, per the usual, is, of course, the Nick. Hi, Nick.
Hi. Feels good to be nice and synced up, doesn't it?
It sure does. It turns out that podcasters going to podcast, except for when they don't. With me as well, of course, is the Ian.
Yes.
Hi, Ian.
I was hoping you would say the Ian, because if Nick got the Nick and I was just Ian, I'd be disappointed.
And, of course, we're missing the Scott because, well, I don't know if you guys heard the latest, or I suppose it's like the second pass now, episode of Drawn to the Flame, where he has defected, and we broker no besmirchment to our great name, so Scott's now off the podcast, so that's how that rolls. And of course, I don't know if anyone's in our Discord channel, you might have seen the false alarm as to recording live. Oh, no, we're not recording live. There's a good reason. And that reason happens to be sitting with me at my table. We have Matt Newman with us. Matt, hi.
Hi.
Are the restraints too tight? Can I get you anything there?
Yeah, I'm at Sean's lovely home, which means if you never see or hear from me again, the authorities know where to look.
So we're just gonna chat around with Matt today because it seemed like a cool thing to do. So I think We've got no real news. We had our, the release article, but we don't generally cover those because we talk about all the goodies when we talk about the actual scenarios. And then I think we're going to skip on past the community bits. So let's talk a little bit about recent plays. Ian, Nick, you guys got any campaigns running of note? Any fun moments of late?
Well, other than continuing kind of my existing campaigns through Oath, which has been a lot of fun, and I can't talk too much about them because it's very spoilery for when we get to Unspeakable Oath, but the other one is trying out like a Desperate Pete type deck, which is Ashcan Pete, of course. And then I stole this idea from the aforementioned Unspeakable Drawn to the Flame Frank. I believe it was Frank who was talking. I saw his idea of splashing Forbidden Knowledge into Pete and then using that to basically get him to like that 3 sanity threshold and then using all the desperate skills. So that was fun. It's like, I don't know, it's something different to do with Ashcan. So I've been trying that one out.
Was Forbidden Knowledge worth it? Like, I don't know if my experience differs from anyone else, but I don't find it that hard to take horror.
Well, that was the thing. I didn't even end up drawing Forbidden Knowledge, and I was like in desperate range within like 2 rounds anyway. So I'm not sure if it's strictly necessary. There's plenty of horror to go around.
Nice.
Matt, what are you playing lately?
In Arkham or in general?
In Arkham.
The characters that you don't know.
Go on.
No, honestly, I don't really get a lot of time to play sort of
For funsies?
existing material. I'm almost entirely playtesting.
Okay.
Generally, when I'm playing. So,
Interesting.
when I do get the chance to play with printed cards that are real and not proxy, like printouts from the computer at work, it's really a gem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the art counts for so much.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you don't realize it until you're kind of playing. And I know both Ian and Nick, you can attest to this too, having made your own custom scenarios, playtesting, whatnot. Like playing that blank card with the text on it, you still get there. And if you've got an active imagination, you're probably pretty okay. But as soon as that art hits it, it's like, yep, now we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's
there's been a couple times playing with, like my wife will be playtesting a scenario with me, and she'll read a card like 3 or 4 times, and she's like, I just don't understand what's going on. And I'm like, I know, once there's an image there, you'll probably get it. And it usually does. But yeah, that it does make all the difference in the world, having good art.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Ian. Anything I'd want to talk about right now is still kind of under the spoiler curtain, as it were. I had pretty good experience with not Echoes of the Past. What's the next one? Unspeakable Oath. Last night, I'm playing my Kluver, Agnes, and Monster Killer Mark campaign.
Monster Killer Mark.
Ultimately, the resolution went not well. But I enjoyed myself, which is a good thing. So,
Nice.
I didn't have my salty moment like I did with Where Doom Was. Which, I'm always glad. So, Matt, we didn't want this really be kind of a grill 'em and, just kind of the question and answer thing that we've done in the past. But there was one thing that I definitely wanted. Yes, grill 'em and chill 'em. Definitely one thing that I
I'll say,
wanted to
don't
bring.
go past that.
So, I was actually sorting and sleeving cards a few nights back, and on a whim, I decided to turn on Coppola's Dracula. And oddly enough, as I was sleeving and organizing cards and building decks to play the next day, I caught a reference to one Renfield. That I didn't catch prior to just happening upon that scene, because Mr. Renfield, blah 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 on the movie, and I popped up and I was like, Renfield. Oh, there's crickets in that art, isn't there? So I thought that was a really cool reference. So
yeah,
it kind of got me thinking. We talked to you about Labyrinths, and I don't know, probably a lot of our listeners probably still haven't listened to that episode yet because Labyrinths is not out there for general consumption.
Yeah,
but
or they listen to it anyway.
Oh, right, or there's that. But I thought it was really interesting to kind of get your kind of background story perspective on some of the designer cards out there. So
absolutely,
Renfield. I know we've talked in the past. You're a fan of Dracula in general.
Huge fan.
That could have gone wrong.
Sean almost spilled his
cup. So is Renfield actually that Renfield, or was that just a sly reference?
Just a reference. Okay. It's not supposed to be the same character. I don't know. I mean, obviously, Dracula would be something that is in the public. Is it in the public domain?
Yes,
I believe.
It
should be.
Right?
Yeah,
I believe it is. But it wasn't meant to be the same character by any means. Actually, that card is funny because that art already existed.
Oh.
That was actually a card in the old Call of Cthulhu LCG.
Okay.
And when it came time to use that art in the LCG, because I really wanted to use that art in the LCG, I think in the Call of Cthulhu LCG he didn't have a name. It was a non-unique character. So I just decided to give him a name and an identity in the Arkham LCG.
So the art was that specific? Or, I mean, was it...
It was... I'm trying to remember the name of the original Call of Cthulhu card. I don't remember the title, but he
Determined
was
Eschatologist?
An eschatologist, yeah. Something like that.
Oh, okay. So then that...
Yeah.
Literally those two contexts... I suppose the Call of Cthulhu LCG now is the third one that I've now heard of. Mm-hmm. But Arkham and Dracula are the only two times I have ever heard that term.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I suppose that makes sense. So for anyone who's not aware, Renfield was an inmate in I don't know what asylum.
I don't remember the name.
One of the characters is a doctor, and he works there. And basically, he's like this cast-off servant of Dracula who's using crickets to capture birds, and then using those birds to capture cats. And he's trying to accumulate all this life to garner Dracula's favor when he comes back into power. And it's this really interesting thing. So if you look at the art on Renfield, you see the little crickets all about his little workspace there. I thought that was a really cool little reference. So yeah, that's kind of what I was...
Yeah, it's just a little reference to... I do that often with names and sometimes with even places, but there we go. There's it's just eschatologist.
Okay.
Yep. In the Call of Cthulhu LCG, he was a Miskatonic character.
Discard a prophecy card from your hand to cancel if a card effect is triggered. All right.
Yeah.
I really
bugs and everything.
Yeah, bugs and everything.
So it was not a happy accident, but a happy coincidence, I guess.
He kind of looks like Tom Cruise's broody brother.
He does. Yeah, he does. And I think, is that Alexander Dinge? Yeah, it is.
Is it?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, it totally
Yep.
is. Yeah, he does good work.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
And he did like all the Hobbit art for the Black Riders box, right? In Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he does good work. There's a lot of art packed in, a lot of art power packed into that family because he's married to Magali, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
Oh, power couple.
Yeah,
for sure.
They do very good work. Okay, so guys, did you have any kind of similar questions to pick Matt's brain on the origin of certain things?
Mine are all really broad, so I'll let Ian go first.
Okay, sure. Well, the one thing that popped out at me that I've always been wondering is what exactly was going on in the Clover Club that night, because we find Dr. Morgan kind of tripped out. So one of the things I've seen people ask, and I've been curious about, is like, was the Clover Club in on the weird stuff happening, or it's just Arkham and weird stuff happens, so people are just like drugged or tripped out in the back?
I think there's a couple interpretations that I don't want to say exactly what I was thinking
Sure.
when I wrote it, because one thing that I've learned from reading a lot of Lovecraft's material is he purposely doesn't explain everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of good horror writers do that because it gets you thinking what's the real explanation, and sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes there is, but it's sort of veiled and you have to figure it out for yourself. So there's a couple really good interpretations of what's going on in the Clover Club, and I won't tell you what I was thinking when I wrote it, because I did have an idea in mind. But I'll tell you a couple ideas that I've heard other people say.
Sure,
that
that's
I think
fair.
are interesting. One is this idea that that there's someone on the inside in the Clover Club who was sort of leading the cult to Morgan. And they were sort of prepping the what's the word, the attack, I guess, before the monsters showed up, because they just kind of show up, right? And you're like, how did they know?
Yeah,
so that's
true.
one possible explanation. Another is just the gang. They're seeing that Morgan's doing really well, right? He's doubling. They convince him to double down, it says in the flavor text, because when someone's doing really well in a casino, you don't say, oh, go ahead and cash out. You want them to stay long enough so that they can start losing money again. And what's a great way to get someone to start losing money?
Slip them a Mickey.
Yeah, exactly. You already know there was something in the drinks, right? So so it could just be that Morgan had something in the drinks as well.
Equally
of course,
possible.
he was also talking with a couple corpses.
Yes, he was.
So that puts a wrench in that a little bit, but
It's a really strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, but part of it's also just I want to keep people on their toes story wise. So walking in and seeing Morgan happily and kind of joyfully but weirdly playing poker with a couple of corpses is,
you walk in and you go,
expect
that man is not very lucid right now.
Right, exactly. You expect him to be dead, or you expect him to be fine and everything's fine, or maybe some other thing, but you didn't expect that. So.
Yeah, I definitely do appreciate that element compared to I can't think of many other card games or games in general where there's that much player interpretation of what exactly is happening in a way that's not like, oh, what were they thinking, but it's more like, oh, what could this mean? So I always appreciate that aspect. While you were talking, I just thought of an alternate third theory, which is there is literally something in the drinks, and the monsters appear because people got transformed by the drinks, and then they busted in. That's what.
Psilocybin sir.
Which means if you drank in the Clover Club, that after the cycle is over, you're going to transform into a monster. You heard it here first.
The entire path to Carcosa cycle is happening because you had a drink in the nothing to do with the KO at all.
It's just a really bad trip.
You're still at the table with Morgan.
Just playing poker.
Oh man,
playing Arkham Horror, the card game.
Well, one thing I thought was really cool, story interpretation wise, is how the act and agenda can move at different speeds, different playthroughs, and kind of how that plays into it. Because sometimes you'll already be to Dr. Morgan by the time the monsters break in, so it's like noise in the background and
right.
And then sometimes you won't even be there yet, and those playthroughs tend not to end quite so well.
Yeah, that was Nate's idea. That was very early in our sort of visioning for the game. and he basically said exactly that, is when you're playing Lord of the Rings or most storytelling game, you hit the same kind of beats. And so when you replay the quest, you know what those beats are going to be. Like, we're going to get into Dol Guldur, we're going to rescue the prisoner, we're going to get out, there's going to be a Nazgul blocking our path, we're going to fight the Nazgul, and we're going to get out.
We're losing all our horses and items in the
Right,
Dunlin
yeah.
trap. Let's prep for it.
Right. And there's something to be said for that. That's good, because it makes it easy to continue telling the story from that point, because you know where everyone's going to be.
Sure.
But if you split the story into 2 sections and then have you don't know where you're going to be in section A when you hit section B, it makes things more interesting, makes things a little bit more replayable, makes things harder for me.
Yeah, I was about to
I
say.
don't know. Sometimes it doesn't line up, right? Sometimes it doesn't line up at all, and you have to try to find a way to reconcile the 2.
Yeah, because I recently started, on Ian's recommendation, playing Life is Strange, and it kind of got me thinking, because I'd played like the Telltale Walking Dead and kind of that format of game before, but
I love that game, by the way.
yeah, just those really narrative-driven games. Like, I wrap my head around, like, God, how many like flow charts do the writers have to have to figure out how this all ties together? Like, do you ever have to
Especially
scrap
that game.
ideas because you just can't pull it back?
Yeah, sometimes. There have been a couple times where, I'd get all the way to the point where we're playtesting, and there'd be a moment where, and it's hard because sometimes it's the sort of thing where only 10% of people would find this interaction, this like weird story interaction,
Sure.
where they're like, oh, I got to Act 3 before I got to Agenda 2, and this doesn't line up.
Something breaks.
Yeah, something is weird. Mechanically, it all works, but story-wise, it doesn't make any sense.
Oh, sure.
And you have to go back and be like, okay, maybe the story in Act 3 has to be different, or yeah.
Like, one thing I thought, kind of to that point, probably was, since we're talking about The House Always Wins, that the Striking Fear set doesn't get shuffled in until the Abominations show up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think in a very early draft of that scenario, you didn't even draw cards from the encounter deck at the start, because it was supposed to be, you just walk in, everything's fine.
Yeah,
everything's safe.
interesting.
There's nothing scary, and that was like too easy. Like, not too
You
easy,
just
but
take
it's like,
9 actions
yeah.
with no recourse.
Yeah, basically, it was there was no tension at all.
Yeah.
So then I came up with the idea of just shuffling the scary things in later.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
The Abominations, and then the Striking Fear, and
And
the criminals to an extent, too.
yes,
Yeah.
the pit boss specifically, I
Yeah.
thought was pretty brilliant, and the fact that Aloof exists in this game, like, I don't know of any other game where a similar mechanic exists, and it's so thematically driven, right? Because it's like, how many games would you play where there are enemies, but they don't care about
Just
you?
hanging out.
They're just there, just doing the thing, just doing their whippoorwill thing.
Yep. Whippoorwills.
Oh God, whippoorwills. So one other one that I was a little curious on the origin was Alyssa. Was she pre-existing in any format prior to Arkham? Because I know the art existed prior. Because I've seen is it clairvoyance in Eldritch, and I'm sure it's been used elsewhere.
I think it is clairvoyance in Eldritch. But yeah, actually in the Call of Cthulhu LCG, she exists as Alyssa Graham.
Oh,
Speaker of the Dead.
Interesting.
Same identity and everything.
okay.
And that's not the first time I've lifted a card title or like an identity for a character completely from the Call of Cthulhu LCG, because sometimes there are some FFG invented characters that we thought were really, really cool, and we wanted to carry them over.
How much story exists for those characters that FFG kind of creates? Like, obviously the investigators have a lot more backstory going on, but say you're Alyssa Graham, like what is there like an in FFG mythos that you get to follow, or do you kind of get to go your own way?
It kind of depends on the character. Some characters have more story than others. I think Alyssa Graham doesn't really have much, but some of the characters were actually featured in story text that was written for the what they were called Asylum packs in the Call of Cthulhu LCG. So you'd open up an Asylum pack and there'd be a story, and it'd be an ongoing story. It's not a story that you play through, but it's a story that you're reading every time you pick up a new pack.
Similar to like what L5R is doing now.
Yeah, basically, similar idea. And so a lot of those characters would show up in the story, and so they'd be more fleshed out than usual. I don't think Alyssa Graham was one of those characters, but for example, Lady Esprit in Curse of the Rougarou, she is.
Okay.
If you pick up the oh my, I forget the name of the box. The Shub Niggurath themed deluxe box for Call of Cthulhu was
Black
all
Goat of
set
the Woods?
in Is that what it's
I
called?
don't know. I just took a shot.
Oh, I think that was not actually the title, but a title that it could have been. It sounds just shy of being correct. But yeah, so that entire set was set in New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
So we took some of the characters from there, Lady Esprit being one of them. So she's actually in the story text in that deluxe box.
She's a cool ally.
She's interesting.
It's actually very... Most of the time when I play Rougarou, I really push to become a werewolf because why not?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you gotta.
But
At least once.
when we Iron Manned the core campaign prior at Arkham Knights prior to opening up to Dunwich, we played through Rougarou in that campaign, and I took Lady Esprit as Mark.
Oh, she's great. That's Mark. Oh my goodness.
Made for each other.
Yeah, definitely.
I want a side story where they go off and get married and hang out in her hut in the bayou. Make it happen, FFG.
Mark is true to Sophie.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. So
Mark
in the
strikes me
fiction,
as a
she's-
one-lady man.
She's actually dead, though, right?
Oh,
It's not
she's
like a mystery that
legit
she.
dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's no interpretations there. She's dead.
Oh, Mark. That's all right.
But that's why the card called Sophie is a photo of Sophie.
I thought there might be some ambiguity that she might be missing,
Or the
something.
subtitle,
like,
In
you know
Loving
how, like,
Memory.
maybe a character dies off screen and we never actually see the body.
Oh no, Mark.
It's not
sees-
Mary Jane from the 1990s Spider-Man cartoon, Sean.
That's definitely not where I was going, but I appreciate the
Oh.
reference.
One of the reasons why Mark's sanity is not at its greatest point right now is because he sees it happen right in front of his eyes.
Because it was all his fault.
Right. Well, that's just Mark's.
Right, yeah,
Mark's
that's what I
way of
mean,
thinking
yeah.
He was
about it,
probably raised Catholic.
I don't know the answer to that one.
Oh, I was raised Catholic, and
Gotcha.
guilt is a big part of that experience. So,
I was raised Jewish. I know how you feel.
Oh, man. That's great.
so talking a little bit about that, because I know there's an awesome push now to kind of add a lot to the Arkham Files mythos with the Investigators book, and now the novellas that are coming out.
Yep.
Kind of with the old slew of fiction, there's that the Feeders from Within are kind of the one book that I've read, and that's the one that features Mark, Diana, and Carolyn. I think pretty prominently are the big characters.
Yep.
Kind of with this new push to fiction, are you guys still considering everything in the past to be canon, or is it kind of like the Star Wars thing where the old EU, that's legends now? We can.
It's kind of in between. I've used flavor text from some of those old novels before, and many of them I think are really, really good. But officially, I don't think any of them are canon per se. So I think we're kind of picking and choosing little bits and pieces here and there.
Okay.
So I can't say for sure no, they're not canon, or yes, they are canon. I think that anyone who's interested should definitely pick them up and read them because they are fun reads. I'm actually a big fan of the Dance of the Damned trilogy.
Okay.
That's not the name of the trilogy. That's the name of the first book. But
Okay.
that one's really good, and it features two of my favorite characters, Tony Morgan and Daisy Walker.
Okay. Tony's the gangster?
Tony is the bounty hunter.
Bounty hunter, okay.
Yeah. So he's
the gangster?
He's interesting.
Michael?
McGlenn is
Okay.
the gangster. Yeah. Tony's interesting because he works within the confines of the law, sort of, but he's kind of a for lack of a better term, roguish character.
Sure.
So I like him a lot, and he's kind of rough and tumble.
That's kind of where you want to be, I suppose, as a creator, where you can use and repurpose things that have been done, but you still have a little discretion to be like, maybe that's not going to work for what we're doing right now. So
Yeah, I would say the Investigators of Arkham book was meant to sort of reset the brand to a new starting point.
okay, and that was kind of why I asked, because it kind of
Yeah.
seemed that way.
Yeah, that was certainly the intent, but that doesn't mean that everything that happened before it is done.
So you have
It's not like
taken
Legends,
pretty
you
much
know.
exactly the Star Wars approach, where it's like, hey, maybe we'll use this
Sure,
old
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, that's true. I guess that is basically the Star Wars approach in a nutshell. Because there are bits and pieces of those other books that we can and we have, brought forward.
Sure.
So
Guys, I'm going to keep this rolling until you guys interject.
yeah,
Well, I'm gonna
interrupt Sean, or he'll just keep going.
It's what I do.
I'm gonna jump into the game design part of it, which I know we've kind of been talking about art and lore and that sort of thing, but this is kind of lore related. So we have a lot of really good allies in the game, and it's largely considered that allies are some of the strongest cards available to players right now. With this whole, like, I think about allies like Brother Xavier or Peter Sylvester. Are these ones that you come up with a character concept first and then try to, like, create the card around that? Or do you look at it and go, Guardian needs help with, sanity and will or something like that. What can I do that would be a really good tool for that? Like, which do you usually approach first, the concept or to fill a need for that class?
That's a good question. I think really it kind of depends on the character and the point in time in which I'm designing that particular card. So, for example, Brother Xavier, and I'm sure you've heard me say this a couple times now already on this podcast, that was art that existed in the Call of Cthulhu RPG. And, we're trying to repurpose some of this art because it's good artwork. And I'd say art in the game is probably like 70-30 new art to old art. Maybe 60-40. I don't know the exact ratio. But anyway,
it's good. I don't care where it comes from.
Right, yeah. So Brother Xavier was an existing character in the Call of Cthulhu. But, again, he wasn't much of a character aside from a name and some flavor text and an art piece.
Right.
So at that point in time, I didn't have much to go on, so I thought, what does Guardian need right now? And I liked the idea of an ally who could soak other people's damage and horror. That seemed very Guardian-y. You're the tank, you want to be taking the damage. And the rest of his abilities kind of came from that. We're like, well,
Gotcha.
He's going to be taking damage, he's probably going to die at some point. What's going to happen when he dies?
X gonna give it to you.
Is that what people say?
That's what I said. That was kind of my running joke. I was trying to force the entire Iron Man Dunwich. Whenever I'd toss down Brother X, be like, X gonna give it to you.
That's how it's true. Were you the only person who laughed at that?
I think I got everyone the
You got a
first
couple
time.
chuckles. Oh, okay.
And then it was just eye rolls after that. But that's kind of how I live my life. It's fine.
I would have been on board
Right,
with that.
So that
Thanks, Ian.
I laughed. But anyway, yeah.
Again, the first time.
So some of the allies I definitely kind of think about what that class needs, or sometimes what a specific investigator needs. Like Alyssa, for example. That was an ability that I don't know if it was actually different before we started working on Marie, but once we started working on Marie, it was thought we should probably have some more Doom on player cards for her to play around with. But then there are other characters, and I can't think of one off the top of my head actually, but there are other characters where we've definitely thought of the ability first,
Sure.
and then, or either thought of the ability first and then picked a character based on the ability, or we want to put this character into a set. What's an ability that makes sense for this person?
So what about Peter Sylvester then? Because he's one that, like, when I look at it, I'm like, wow, of course, there's Arkham University. Of course there's going to be a football team. Like, it fit so well, but it was a character I had never heard of before. Was that one that was repurposed, or was that one that was totally original?
That's a Matt Newman original,
That's
right?
a Matt Newman original, yeah. No,
that's awesome.
That's a good choice, because that is one that is completely, fictional. That was so the identity for that character was very much, I like the idea that survivor allies, if Survivor is the character in the horror movie that survives at the end, that you don't expect to be the one who survives, because that's usually the case in, like, a classic slasher film, right?
Right.
Then
I
Survivor
expect
allies
that
are the
next,
people who...
the next Survivor we're going to get, their subtitle is going to be The Last Girl.
Right.
The final girl.
Yeah,
Final Girl, there it is.
Survivor allies are the ones who, help that person out throughout the movie and maybe don't survive, right?
It's pretty tough to kill Pete, it turns out.
Yeah, no, and and he's fine. But Peter Silvestri, his design was basically, he's kind of your best friend on campus, right? Like, he's your bro who helps you out, and who, when you're terrified, he's the one who supports you and snaps you out of it, right, and gets you through it. So that's kind of where his identity came from. And then I like you said, I like the idea that, let's show more facets of Miskatonic University than just cult studies, right? That's not what the school
Yeah.
is actually about. That's kind of what it's
Right.
become, you know, in like, I don't want to say pop culture because I'm sure pop culture doesn't know anything about Miskatonic University, but like the pop culture of Arkham, I
Right.
guess, is that Miskatonic University is a place for people to study.
That's where the
cults
weird
and,
stuff
and
happens.
ghouls and stuff, and that's not really. It's just like Harvard or any other Ivy League university. It's going to have all the facets of an Ivy
Right.
League university.
Which one was it actually based on? Was it Brown?
I think it's Brown. Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense for that area.
Oh man, I do love me some Peter though.
Yeah, he's great. I didn't realize at the time that I was adding a third Peter into the. There's Peter Clover, Peter Silvestri, Ashcan Pete. Someone pointed that out and said, "You must really like the name Peter." And I was thinking, oh, I didn't even think about that.
See, out here, I just thought you were a big Nickelodeon fan, and you were giving us a built-in way to have the adventures of Pete and Pete all the time.
Not intentional.
I hope we get a Peter for every class.
Gotta spread them out.
Yeah. Guardian Peter, Mystic Peter. It's the same Peter, just with different outfits.
That would be amazing.
It's just treat Peter Sylvester like a paper doll and just change the clothes that's on him. Like exact same artwork, just with something very badly photoshopped over the top of it.
I'm pretty sure there's a subreddit for that.
And
That's a penis joke, everyone.
great. His
Oh,
name is
Peter.
spelled slightly differently each time, so you can run all of them.
Yes. There we go.
So I know we got a fair amount of backstory, at least on the back of her card for Safina, but I know Safina is also a Newman original, right? So did you kind of... Is that a lot more work to kind of come up with the backstory for a Gator than it is for an ally or an objective?
Yeah, and in fact, it's not even necessarily true to say it's a Matt Newman original, because basically, the new investigator is vetted by the entire Arkham story team, which is myself, Dane, who works on Elder Sign, Nikki, who works on Eldritch Horror, and Katrina Ostrander, who's our fiction editor, and headed up by Michael Hurley, who's one of our executives at A&A. So yeah, new investigators are a big deal. And for Safina, I think we kind of sat together in a room and hashed out a whole bunch of ideas, and Safina was the one that interested everyone the most.
Now,
so
was
that's
it
the one
you
that we
trying to
ran with.
sneak in like 6 different Netrunner references? Because I honestly see so many little Netrunner references in that card. Probably more mechanically than anything else. But you've got the Kate, the painter motif.
Right.
You've got kind of Andromeda's ability where she starts with this giant opening hand.
That wasn't intentional, although I will say that Andromeda was a little bit of an inspiration, because
She's a good card.
yeah, Andromeda's a lot of fun and everyone likes playing her, but I also thought Andromeda, once you've actually started the game, she's basically blank.
Right.
That's true.
So
She's less interesting
I wanted to,
mid-game.
Right. So I wanted to hit that same kind of theme of getting a big start, but then also having something neat to do with that. So she's got, her palette or her gallery, whatever you want to call it, that she can make forgeries of events because she's a forger, right? So it fits thematically and it's also fun to play.
So talk a little bit then about, you said there's a fiction editor, there's a fiction team. Like, is there... I've heard mention talking to Caleb and everyone in the past that there's kind of, is there a subject matter expert specifically for Arkham where if you've got a question on like, hey, is this possible, or has someone already done this, or blah blah blah, that there's like a specific expert to go to?
Sometimes there is, but usually what we do is, since we all work on different games, we kind of use this as an opportunity to make sure that everything stays consistent across the entire brand. So a perfect example of that would be if there's an art piece that maybe there's an art piece from like an old product, right? And someone wants to use it for something, they'll ask the story group, hey, has this art piece been used? And if so, for what? Because we don't want to show, for example, David Renfield. If someone else wanted to use that art piece, because that's not an art piece that I ordered as David Renfield.
Right.
It's an art piece from Call of Cthulhu LCD.
Right.
So if for example, Nikki wanted to use that as an ally in Eldritch Horror, it'd be fine if she used it as a non-unique character, just like eschatologist, because that's true. It'd be fine if she used it as a talent, or like prophecy seeking or something. But if she used it as a named person who was Bob,
Yeah.
you know, like that wouldn't fit. It would be kind of weird. So we use that as a way to remain consistent.
Okay.
And I'd probably say, hey, you should name it David Renfield. It's an actual character in the LCG. And we've done that before.
So once you attach a unique name to it, that kind of sticks across the property to the best of coordination's ability.
Yeah, and sometimes things slip through the cracks, but for the most part, I think we've remained pretty consistent from the time that the story team kind of started, which was around the time the LCG started.
Okay.
Yeah.
FFG's had the Arkham Files license for a really long time, right? So this has to stretch back to, what, like the knots?
Yeah, and back in the day...
Back in the day,
they typically would only be one game at a time, so it wasn't really an issue. Like, there wouldn't be any need for a story team. But now that we have, 3 different games running across the brand, plus novellas and that sort of thing, it becomes a lot more important. And we've actually set up our own little internal wiki for that purpose, for making sure that things remain consistent, and especially for things like the LCG where we introduce a lot of named characters, so like all of those VIPs and all of the characters that are popping up in the story, they all need to be in the wiki, not just for consistency's sake, but also so that maybe later on we can refer to them.
Sure.
We can mention that, for example, Constance Dumaine is a person who lives in French Hill and has parties and stuff. And then Arkham LCG players read that and say, "Oh, that's cool." That's not a real thing, by the way. That's not like coming in a, I just using that as an.
You heard it here first, guys.
No. But there are references like that coming in fiction and stuff. So you probably already caught a couple if you've read Hour of the Huntress.
I am halfway through it, and yes, I've caught a couple.
Yep.
Cool.
So I had a question along the lines of the the Safina New Investigators, because I know in the upcoming Eldritch expansion there's at least one new investigator, the mechanic. I can't remember if there's another one. But I was just curious about, there's like a huge...
Is it Lonnie? It should be Lonnie.
No, it's not Lonnie, but...
You make Lonnie
Lonnie?
From Hour of the Huntress, the...
Lonnie.
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask is what sort of travesty is it that that Jenny's new signature isn't Lonnie? Like,
that was hotly debated.
Oh,
part of it was we used art from the novella. So you see the Green Man medallion actually is in the back end of the novella where we have the digital pages. That's a bad name for them. They're not digital pages.
This page is analog.
Words mean things,
you get
Matt.
the full color pages, the really nice pages at the end. And of course, Jenny's from the cover, and the sacrificial beast is also at the end there. If we wanted to do anything other than that, we would have had to order art for it, and it would have pushed the release. So we made the decision to just go ahead. And plus, the Green Man medallion is also a perfect fit, given that she's looking for the entire story.
Yeah.
Sure, but Lonnie's just so kick-ass.
Lonnie is really awesome, and I will say that everyone on the story team loves Lonnie.
Who does? I don't know how you can read that story and not love Lonnie.
Yeah, that's good. So that means
I'm sorry,
maybe
Ian, I
she'll
completely usurped your point.
It's fine. She'll pop up again at some point, hopefully.
I'm sure she will.
So along those lines, speaking of Lonnie and other newer characters, so I was asking about, so what kind of inspires, like, given that there's already a big stable of investigators, like, let me create a new one for Carcosa, like, let me bring in a new character for Rogue for Carcosa.
There were a couple things that we were thinking about when we designed Safina. We were thinking about, I was looking at the total, like the grand investigator pool, and I was thinking, you're sitting on your phone there, Sean.
We're good.
I just didn't want you to quit. I was thinking about rogues in general, and I was seeing that we had less investigators that I would classify as rogues than the other classes, so I wanted to have another rogue in the pool. And we were already talking about adding a new investigator to the mix for other reasons. One of those reasons being diversity.
Yeah.
And so we came up with this idea of a rogue, and we also wanted a career that we didn't have already. We didn't really have an artist. We had multiple performers.
Yeah, there's enough to throw together like a band at this point.
Yeah, almost, yeah. The Arkham 4. not really.
As long as you can make a band out of a singer, a trumpet, and a violin.
Sure, it's doable.
Someone's done that.
Yeah, so we didn't really have an artist, and then also I was thinking about Carcosa, and of course, art is a major theme of Robert Chambers' works. Like almost half of the characters in The King in Yellow are artists. So it just made perfect sense to have this character be a painter, and then from there we were thinking, okay, but how can a painter be a rogue?
Right.
And that's where the forgeries came in, and then that's where the ability came in. So it all kind of came together in the end, and it was a multi-step process. It wasn't like we sat down and hashed it out in one meeting. It was over the course of many weeks of deliberation.
Nice. Well, yeah. Well, I love it because kind of similar. I remember looking through the rogue list because I happen to be interested in rogues, but I was also looking through the investigator list, and I was thinking the same thing. Like, not a lot of these could actually be classified as rogue, so that totally makes sense. And also, I just like all the new characters that are being introduced to kind of definitely add diversity to what exists, which is always needed. And I guess it's a good mix because of course there's like investigators that in the community we all talk about, like, I want this person, I want Rita, which I really do, and then other people are like, I want I don't know, some person named Diana Stanley, and then someone else will say, I want this. But
and that man is a genius.
So I like that I like that anticipation of like people waiting for that, but then also the new thing of it, like, it's good to get new investigators now, because otherwise it's just like, oh, we're just expecting stuff we already know about. But it's nice to have that excitement of like, it's something new that we didn't expect to come.
As long as that doesn't delay the eventual release of Stanley, I'm on board.
Oh my god, imagine if there was an investigator that was a redeemed cultist but not named Diana Stanley.
It's like Stan Diana.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
That would be amazing. I also realize I've basically painted myself into a corner on this whole thing, because now Matt, because we know each other in person, you like basically can't design that card, because then you're just giving it to me.
I can. It's just got to be good enough that you don't hate me.
No, it doesn't. It can be garbage. It should be garbage. And that's why it's kind of nice coming from where I am, because it's like the only other Arkham game. Like, I played Call of Cthulhu LCG, like the core set, and that's it. So the only other characters that I'm even familiar with are from the old Arkham Horror board game.
Right.
And of them, like, I don't remember the names of half of them, because to me it was like...
We had house-ruled nicknames for all of them.
Yeah, it was pretty much just like, I'm going to play this guy because I want to do this, I want his ability.
Krusty and Boobs
can I
McGee.
be the old man?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So the only two characters that I have, well, I should say three. The only three, well, no, I should say four.
The illusionist.
Okay, never mind. My plot is falling apart here, my idea. Anyway, my point was that, like, Monterey Jack was one that I always really liked. One, because he's named like cheese, and two, because he was a lot of fun in the Arkham Horror board game. So I'd love to see someone like him, but at the same time, when the community goes, oh, Safina's brand new, I'm like, is she really? I had no idea. I thought they were all brand new. I don't know half of these people, so...
Yeah.
But it's really exciting to see that you're doing that. You're still coming up with new identities to inject into this game and into Arkham Files in general.
Do you know
That's good to
offhand,
hear.
like, how many investigators are in the canon right now?
56, I want to say.
Whoa.
57 with Safina, I think.
Oh,
So
good
it's
thing
a
you're
lot.
making new ones then.
Yeah, and going back to what you said, it's a tough line to walk, right? Because one phrase that we throw around in the office a lot is every investigator is someone's favorite investigator, and it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
There are some
Except
people
for
who will
Skids.
say like, oh, this person's my except for Skids. Well, I'll have you know. And there are some that are probably more popular than others, but then there are some that you'll hear someone say is your favorite investigator, and you think, oh, I completely forgot about that character.
Yeah,
You know what I
like,
mean?
oh, that's odd that you would
Yeah,
lock
that's
on to
cool.
that person.
Yeah, so every investigator is someone's favorite investigator, but at the same time, we also do want to keep things fresh, and we also do want to keep things diverse as well. And that's something we're always thinking about. So it's a tough line to walk, and we have to be careful not to overload it too much, because we are trying to strengthen the brand, and to us, the investigators are the brand. Like, that's the one thing that we can call our own. It's the one thing that we can, like put a copyright on.
Sure.
No one else can lay claim to Agnes Baker or Joe Diamond. Those are characters that are ours. So it's very important that we strengthen the brand through those characters. And there's other bits and pieces of Arkham Files that are different from, the Lovecraft lore in general, the Cthulhu mythos. But the more we focus in on these characters, the more the brand will be strengthened. And every time we do invent a new character, one could make the argument that it weakens it a little bit by adding more. Like you just were surprised when I said that there were 57 investigators. So that's something that we're always thinking about. I think it's either 53 or 57. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember.
Well, push for an even 60 either way.
Right.
Either way, you've got a roster.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's a pretty big roster. Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's kind of like one of those things where when you fire up a fighting game and there's a grid of there's like a 6x8 grid of characters to pick. It's like, I'm gonna have to figure all these guys out. But it's cool to have the variety for sure.
Right. Mm-hmm. Or like if you think of a game like Overwatch or
yes.
something. Obviously, there's a lot fewer characters in Overwatch, but with every if they want to strengthen their brand, one of the things that they do is they release videos of these characters and trailers featuring these characters and animated shorts and that kind of thing. And if there were 120 characters, it'd be a lot more like that. Of course, other games like League of Legends have been very successful doing that. So who am I to talk? But anyway, successful. But like fighting games is a great analogy because I play fighting games all the time, and I play, if there's a new Street Fighter game or a new BlazBlue game or something, and I load up the roster.
BlazBlue.
If all my fan favorites are there, I love BlazBlue.
I played the first one.
Don't you mean BlazBlue?
No, it's BlazBlue.
I know
bad
it
at
is.
2D fighting
I know it
games,
is.
I love 2D fighting games.
What's the one that's like an amorphous blob? I got into a really cool air cycle with him where he would just do...
Arakune.
Yeah. So he would just whirl around and hit someone with a tail. And
He's so cool.
Yeah. He was... My friends refused to play with me after
squirrel
that.
boxer.
There's a squirrel boxer? I've only
God.
played the first one. Calamity
Makoto.
Trigger is the first one?
She got introduced in... She got introduced in the story of the second one, but she was a playable character in the
There's
third
a story in BlazBlue?
There is a story. It's really convoluted, but really
Yes,
good.
it
No,
is.
if you follow it, it's actually good. Anyway, I'm getting off track. My point is...
Welcome to the podcast.
My point is... you have a fighting game with a huge roster, a lot of those characters are someone's favorite character. So it's a very apt analogy. And every character that they add dilutes that a little bit, but is also exciting because people say, "Oh, we've never seen this person before." So
Yeah. For anyone who follows Overwatch, Moira is baller.
is Mercy Dunsky?
No, Mercy is
Mercy's
insane
amazing.
right now.
I haven't played Moira, but I heard someone say, "Well, I guess Mercy's done."
No, as long as Mercy's the only character with res, she'll never be done.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
That will always make her the quintessential healer.
New Mercy is insanity.
Rez isn't her ultimate anymore, right? Or
Yeah,
something
so her ultimate used to be she would resurrect anyone who was
like that?
nearby.
Everyone. Now she resurrects one person at a
Now
time.
she has an ability that's on a 15-20 second cooldown that you can res one time. When they first made that change, it was an instant res.
Right.
And it was so stupid. It was so stupid. And then
yeah.
now they've reduced that so that there's a little bit of
Like a 2-second delay.
a
Right.
2-second delay that supposedly you can interrupt, but
Sure.
really the
You
only
can.
way I've seen it interrupted is if you straight up knock her far enough away, or if you kill her.
Or if you kill her, yeah.
Hitting her doesn't actually
Which-
do anything.
Well, you can kill someone in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Overwatch.
She's 200 health. She's easy. A lot of people
Tracer.
can one-shot her.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
just play Tracer.
You can't really interrupt it. You can just shut it down.
right.
That's interrupting.
That is an interrupt.
Anyway,
That's the best
Very rude
interruption.
interrupt.
all right. Righting the ship. Careful. This will become an Overwatch podcast
Right,
in
yeah.
about 2 seconds here.
Sorry, listeners.
That's been a threat since day one.
It really has. God, what? I had a thing. I don't know. Someone else vamp.
We were talking about Safina.
I kind of feel like
Well-
we were talking about Diana.
Who?
Oh.
There it is.
So, one
go
thing
ahead.
that I want to ask, and this is getting into the broader stuff because that's usually what I do. I'm very interested in the design aspect and just where you come up with these ideas. But Dunwich, as a whole, it's the first full campaign that we did. It's the first, you made a very strong decision when going into that by saying we want to approach something familiar, but we want to do it in our own way, which is very much what Arkham Files is all about.
Yeah.
But the story of Dunwich, like, did you approach it like scenario by scenario and go, this scenario I want to do this one I want to do this, or was it more like from the outset you went, I want like this whole scenario to be about X? You know what I mean? Or this whole campaign to be about X. Like, was it a bit more like we want to explore the what this game can do, or was it ultimately about let's do a Dunwich story that takes place after Dunwich? Like, talk us through that.
Sure, yeah. It's kind of a little bit of both, to be honest. So, one thing that I learned from Nate when he was designing the Mirkwood cycle for Lord of the Rings, he said that what he wanted to do was showcase all the different things that the game could do within one cycle. So that's why every scenario in that cycle felt very different from the last one. So I kind of took that approach as well, but at the same time I was also trying to craft a cohesive narrative. So that's obviously tough because you can't go like completely all over the place with each scenario.
I kind of feel like Lord of the Rings in general kind of kept that, where every scenario really kind of has its own thing going on.
Yeah, a little bit. And I've said this before too, but like, it's important to me, especially looking back on Lord of the Rings and seeing we have over 100 scenarios in Lord of the Rings now.
That's insane.
Jeez.
And when you think about every scenario, they all have their hook, right? They all have the thing. If you can describe a scenario in a sentence, and you can describe every scenario with a different sentence, then we've accomplished our goal.
You're captured and they took your shit.
Right.
Aliens in the desert.
Escape from Mount Grant.
Yeah! All right, hey, we can turn this into a game. Describe a
There
scenario
you go.
in one sentence
Yeah.
and see if everyone can guess it.
Yeah. So anyway, we wanted to make sure that no two scenarios felt too similar to one another, and they all had their kind of shtick. And that's something that we carried over into Arkham, for sure. But at the same time, like I said, I was trying to craft a cohesive narrative as well, or at least something with the semblance of a cohesive narrative. So first thing I did was I came up with an outline where I went through the 8 scenarios, and I had a beginning and an end in mind. The beginning was actually the easiest part because we knew that we were picking it up from the Dunwich horror story. And when I say we knew that, I mean I decided that arbitrarily because I thought that would be more interesting than just retelling the Dunwich horror.
Right.
And we hadn't really done that before, so I thought that'd be interesting. So picking up from there, I just thought, what would be the way to get the investigators invested in this previous story, and from there, that led to the idea of the characters from the Dunwich horror getting kidnapped, and you have to go to Dunwich to rescue them, because that's obviously you need a reason to go to Dunwich, right? And I didn't want that reason to be immediately there's rampaging monsters, because that's the exact plot hook from the Dunwich horror. They go to Dunwich because rampaging monsters. Well, monster. Right.
One might call it a horror.
Right. You might.
Of Dunwich.
So anyway, so I kind of took it scenario by scenario. I had like my overarching plot, and I had the locations that I wanted to hit. Like I knew I wanted one scenario to be set entirely within Dunwich Village. And then I knew I wanted one scenario to be set entirely on Sentinel Hill, because I thought that was an interesting location we hadn't really explored much. And then in between those scenarios, I thought, well, let's just explore the rest of Dunwich in one scenario. And then I knew right from the get-go, I think, like when I outlined the 8 scenarios, I gave them each a name. And I think I only named 4 of them at that point in time, and the last one was Lost in Time and Space. That has to be the name of the last one. It has to be.
Yeah.
And,
it's perfect.
Yeah. But I think that's pretty much why you go into the gate at the end, was because I wanted a scenario named Lost in Time and Space.
That's not a bad place to start.
Yeah, and usually when I'm playtesting, I don't have the story fully written. I have a placeholder story just for the playtesters to have some semblance of knowing where the plot's going while they're playing. 'Cause that's obviously important for a game like this. But it's usually just a one sentence. You're at the Clover Club. Things are spooky, like that kind of thing. Right? Yeah, basically. Which is actually an ongoing
Agenda 1A, too spoopy.
Yeah, no, it's an ongoing joke actually, because sometimes the placeholder story is just very threadbare. Spoopy's gonna spoop, like that kind of thing. And sometimes the feedback that I get is, I don't understand what's going on quite yet. I'm like, I know. I'm sorry. Let me.
I was hoping it was keep this flavor text for the actual card.
Oh, I infamously, notoriously put joke flavor text on a lot of player cards. To the point where I often have to have... No, I mean on the playtest versions.
Oh!
Which I often have playtesters saying, is this the real flavor? You can't do that. And I'm like, no, I want an
enemy called Spoopy, and its flavor text to be gonna spoop.
Yep. All right, I'll get right on that.
No, but I think we all do appreciate the snark that comes in the flavor text. Like, did you think the cops were gonna help you?
Oh well, that was like, that was an entirely different like thing that I wanted to do. That's very important to me.
It's a bulleted resolution info. Like, it's not even flavor text. It's just there. Yep. And I'm like, wait,
That's what makes it great.
Excuse me, Matt?
What's the one that basically goes, what are you doing? Is it Act 1B of Last King? Where it's like, why are you looking at this?
Yeah.
What'd you do? Why?
Defines madness and says, turn it back over, dummy.
Doesn't say dummy.
It should.
No. I wanted people to flip that over.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I expected them to. Well, that was part of the thing. Was it was like blank in the playtest version, and I was like, what do I put on the back of this? There's no reason to flip it over. And that was what led to it. Was people kept flipping it over and being like, "There's nothing here," and I'm like, "I know."
Well, and the little touches like that really make sense for Carcosa specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I imagine you did a lot of research and source material reading for Carcosa. Do you have a favorite story from King in Yellow?
It's tough. My two favorite. I'll say my two favorite because I can't decide one. I really like In the Court of the Dragon.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I think you'll
That's
get
the
a
one where
healthy dose of that in the next scenario.
That's the one where the person's like being chased by something you can't totally see, right?
He can sort of see it. It's like the organist at this church.
That's right.
Yeah.
The
Creepy, tall, pale, like wearing a black trench coat organist. So you'll get a healthy dose of In a Phantom of Truth, which is the next scenario. Is almost entirely inspired by In the Court of the Dragon.
Nice.
So yeah, that's one of my favorites. The way that he describes, it's such a simple thing. He's not really being chased. Like, the organist is just walking around, and like he just keeps seeing him, and it seems like something that shouldn't be so scary, and yet the way that Robert Chambers writes it, you're right there with him being terrified. So I love that one. And
Sorry,
I also
everyone, don't mind my garage door opening beneath us.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was a bomb or...
That's about to happen again, so just ignore it.
I also really like the Yellow Sign.
Yeah.
Where the clasp of black onyx comes from. The ending to that story is everything. I mean, the rest of it is eerie. It's kind of weird.
That's the one with the actual artist, right? Am I thinking of the right one?
Yeah, he's a painter, and everything that he's painting is just has like this it's like this underbelly of sickness. Yeah, it's just like he can't get it right. The colors are all off, and his assistant is reading The King in Yellow, and he's stunned to find that it's even in his house because he refused to read it. He didn't want it in his house at all, and then it like tumbles to the ground open, and he catches the first couple words, and from that moment he's like invested. And then they read the whole thing, and I won't spoil the ending, but the ending is ridiculously good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that story. Yeah.
A fan of Repair of Reputations myself. That one.
That's a great one.
That one, because I it's very rare that I read a story with an unreliable narrator. It's just, for some reason, the stories I read tend not to have that mechanic in it. So it took me longer than I care to admit to realize, like, oh, this guy's kind of kooky.
Oh yeah, none of this. Yeah,
I'm like, damn, this guy up in this attic, he's got a thing going on. An empire. He's building an empire out of his apartment. What is this guy?
Yeah,
fucking Bill Gates.
Yeah, and it's set in like the future of like our time.
Yeah. So because it was written in the late 1800s, and it was set in like near future, like 20 years in the future from there,
like
right?
But it's like crazy, and there's like
But the thing is,
there's literally suicide booths.
Yeah,
suicide booths.
But the thing is, by the end of it, you start questioning whether it's even in the future or whether it's just like
right. Just question everything.
Like
and the whole opening to that, where it's actually like eerily topical because they're talking about driving out all the immigrants and keeping things pure.
Sure.
And, like just all that kind of shit that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting set of stories.
Yeah.
So that was one where I didn't take any of the characters from the repair, but the tone and like the writing style is very much something that I studied and wanted to put into the story text for Path to Carcosa, which is one of the reasons why when you're playing through the Unspeakable Oath, you're just not sure what you're reading.
Well,
like,
yeah.
Is it real? Is it not? Yeah.
I feel like Carcosa has definitely nailed that. Like, if you scroll through our Discord, you'll see a lot of that. That's just like people like, is this real? Is this not? Like, what have I done? Like, is this actually a good thing or not? Like, specifically, like with the obviously you don't have to comment on this, but in The Last King, like with what you choose to do with the people in the house, like people
I was just
people
thinking
are
that.
like we've talked about spoiler.
Oh, yeah.
We've did our spoiler discussion of Carcosa, so I can talk about those spoilers. But choosing to kill everyone in the house, I'm like, wait, that was too easy. That's gonna come back to bite me, isn't it?
I
And then they're like, oh, they're all victory 0.
I sat looking at that story insert for a solid 5 minutes,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what the hell I wanted to do. The indecision was very real.
That's a tough one.
Yes,
I
because oh, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just that I think it's the Carcosa has really nailed that tone so far, because like Yellow Sign is my favorite of those stories, but Repair of Reputations is like the key story because it starts it off, and from that
Such a tone
and from
setter.
that point forward, you're just not sure. Like, even when Yellow Sign, I'm like, oh, wait, did he said he didn't want to read the King in Yellow, but maybe he read it and just isn't is lying about it. Like, basically you can never take anything for granted after that point, which just sets this interesting tone. And I feel like Curtain Call's the same way in Carcosa, where it's
Yes.
that sets the tone immediately of like what's real or what's not, because it starts with like you're in a play and like the classic, you fall asleep and wake up, and then from that point forward it's just like you end up questioning.
Is it a dream? Is it a flashback?
Yeah, you end up
Right.
questioning everything.
Cool. I'm glad that shines through because that was really like a major goal of mine for this cycle. And I think I will say that I think the intro text of the next scenario is my favorite story text like I've ever written for anything. So I'm really excited for that one.
I'll be interested to see if the campaign takes the same turn that the King in Yellow does, where all of a sudden you get past a few stories and it's like, what am I reading now? This is just like this weird looping prose that it's almost like a word cloud more than a story.
It's a word cloud.
Carcosa, King in Yellow, investigator, test.
Well, because I read the stories in King in Yellow like in the order that they're written. So
Right.
you hit that point. I think it's like after the one where that takes place in the castle out in the woods, and then like after that, they just get weird.
Well, then they turn into poetry.
Yeah,
basically.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So
So
the haiku scenario
The
for
haiku
the
scenario.
eighth one.
All the game text
Limericks.
is written in poetry too. You have to decipher it. No, I mean I wanted to be careful not to make anything where you didn't actually know what was happening rules wise. You can still play the scenario. It's all just the story is whack.
Sure.
Yeah.
So now I'm someone who's approached Arkham Horror, the LCG, from a background that's probably equally strengthened by card games and role-playing games. So I just want to say that I really appreciate the flavor text that's written like the GM is talking to you.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
So you get flavor text that's on like every cards where it's like he did this and blah blah blah, and then you get flavor text, and the first time I really noticed it wasn't until the taunt card, and it was you steal your nerves and shout into the darkness. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, so keep that up, man. That's the kind of stuff that I love to see.
Awesome,
is
thank
treating it. It's like breaking down that wall and going like, no, it is a card game, but yeah, there's role playing game in here, and that. It just feels so good to see that.
Yeah, I one of our early design motifs was we wanted it to feel like you could tell the story of every card that you play. And obviously that's hard because in a card game so many things are abstracted. like resources. Like, what are resources?
Yeah.
Am I spending cash, or is it like an internal resource of my willpower and my strength?
I'm stuck in this
it's all of those
otherworldly
things.
dimension and time and space.
Right.
Oh, hi, Arcane Initiate. Where'd you
look,
come
hey.
from?
Yeah, or the Dr. Mylan busts out of your closet of your study.
Yeah.
What's going on? What? The door's gone? So it was, but it
You
was
have a
important.
sink. My hand's full of Migo.
It was important to us that someone could come up with a story, and people have. I've read them on Board Game Geek and other resources, and it's pretty crazy that people have come up with like really cohesive stories out of their card game. So yeah, like I said, that was something that we wanted. So like the second person perspective was a choice from the get go.
Yeah, especially on player cards.
Oh yeah, and
Yes.
also on locations too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually something I was thinking. If we ever get around to twitching another video, that would be kind of cool to have one of us actually kind of play the GM and maybe kind of interpret encounter cards as they come off.
That would be cool.
It's probably more coordination than we're capable of, but. So one thing I actually was kind of curious about, and kind of touching on investigators pulls into this, like traits. Traits are so interesting, especially in kind of FFG's overall design philosophy, where it's you have your factions and you have your functions, and then you've got these traits that are kind of like these cross synergies between them. So kind of as you design, are you ever of the mind like you're laying seeds for the future, like, oh, when we finally get around to doing something with the sorcerer trait, then oh, we've got this slew of cards. Like, do you try to think far ahead? Do you think it's possible to actually kind of fully game it out?
It depends on the trait. That's a great question, by the way, because and it's not always the same for every designer and for every game. I'm sure you've noticed that pretty much every card in Arkham has a trait. There are very few cards that don't have a trait at all, and that's a me thing. That's a design choice that I made. I always want there to be traits because just in case I want to go back and call on that particular trait or that particular card, I can through a means other than just the title, which would feel awkward to me. And sometimes I do have a particular synergy in mind, and sometimes it's just natural, right? Like firearms, I want to be able to make a card that does something with firearms. So every gun needs to have the firearm trait, and if it doesn't, then it feels weird to me. Or weapon or item. But also sometimes with events too, like tactic or insight. But then other times I put a trait on there just because it feels right, like sorcerer.
It does feel really right.
Right, and even if I don't have, like, who is this person? Like Alyssa Graham, she's got a subtitle, but aside from that, you don't know much about her. But just throwing the word sorcerer on there tells a story, or criminal or police or whatever. That's maybe a bad example because Speaker to the Dead is pretty evocative already, right? But anyway, and sometimes I don't have a particular synergy in mind, or like a future card or a card in that set or anything like that. But now I have the opportunity that if I ever wanted to, I could design a card that said, play a sorcerer for 3 less or something.
Right. Kind of like
dude. Right.
I would say kind of like the Avian Thrall and how it targets ranged weapons, and we don't have a ranged weapon yet.
Yeah,
so I'm waiting to get that crossbow or something.
Slingshot.
Yeah, and that's exactly what that is. That's me just looking into the future and thinking, well, hold on, what if I ever make a bow, or like a throwing axe or something like. It can't be firearm, but it should hit the Avian Thrall easier, right? So,
Right.
Yeah.
The survivor weapon, the throwing rock.
Right. A pebble. Does 0 damage and just annoys. Remember that you have harassed the enemy.
And we had a role-playing session once, Nick, I know you'll remember, where there was this big boss enemy. And at one point, our goblin character, he might have been like a gnome, he was some
He's a goblin shaman.
Yes, goblin shaman character. Just hooks a rock at the dragon, and it happened to be that we had whittled it down far enough that ended up.
It was literally at 1 hit point.
That's amazing.
And from thenceforth, that rock became the dreadful rock of deathful doom is what we call it.
Deadly Doom.
Deadly Doom.
That's amazing.
So Yeah, that's what I always love the Survivor weapons, because, like, literally they're all just everyday tools.
It's like household tools.
They're not weapons.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone, I mean, a fire axe, I would consider
Well,
to
that's
be
a weapon. Yeah.
But
That's
it's
not
a
his
tool.
primary
I want the-
purpose, though.
That's true. Yeah.
I want like the bar stool to be a survivor weapon,
stool.
or the pool cue. You know, like
A sharpened
broken
dinner
pool cue.
plate is what I'm aiming for.
Who throws a shoe? Honestly.
A shoe, yeah.
I think the art description for scavenging said something about it. You know, he's got a table leg, right? And it's like he's clearly intending to use this as a weapon. It's not going to go.
Yeah. Okay. So talking then a little bit more about traits, like, it's okay. So first of all, what's like your favorite one that you've done where you pop the trait on the card and you're like, "Yup."
was it unidentified or whatever was on Strange Solution?
Well, that's actually a subtitle, not a trait.
What?
Although
There's a
looking
trait
back,
down there, isn't there?
There's a. I think the trait is just item,
Oh.
or I think it's item science. Science.
Science.
Science is a great trait.
Ooh, it's a science item.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, you're right.
Science. Yeah, unidentified is its subtitle, and the same thing goes for the archaic glyphs. It's untranslated. There is a trait that I really like on the set that I'm working on right now, but I can't tell you.
It wouldn't be Matt
I know,
Newman
that's
if he didn't
usually
pop
not-
in
I didn't-
just a little bit of a CTs.
I don't want to, but it's the truth. No, there's. I like. The one danger with traits, I will say this. One danger with traits is once you put a cool trait on a card, everyone's gut reaction is that that's going to be a deck type. And that's not always the case, but it sometimes is like a unforeseen consequence of, and sometimes,
Right.
and it's hard to predict, right? Like we have 3 or 4 cards with science on it.
Yeah.
No one has come out saying, "Oh, I can't wait for the science deck." Oh, I bet there's going to be 10 science cards in this cycle. But when we spoiled the occult card, there's like one occult card. Immediately, everyone's thinking, "Oh, it's going to be occult. There's going to be a ton of occult cards."
Well, there's now 2 investigators who specifically
right.
call it out.
And there's a reason why they can take occult cards. And there's also a reason why there's not 19 occult cards.
Right.
But you know that's always a danger of as soon as you slap a trait on a card, and have another card that refers to it, especially, then everyone immediately thinks there's going to be like some grand synergy, and sometimes there is, but sometimes there's not. And that's also a side effect of half or over half of the cards in every pack being dedicated to the story and not to your deck building. You know.
Yeah.
And of those cards, some of those cards are upgrades too. So you're not getting a ton of new cards, like brand new cards every time you open a pack. You are in the grand scheme of things when you go through the entire cycle, but it's not like L5R where you open a pack and it's all just brand new cards.
Right.
Yeah.
The player card pool definitely grows much more slowly in a co-op LCG. Though I think Arkham is a little bit better positioned since 2 of is the maximum.
Yeah, that was a helpful boon of the 2 copies.
And as an aside, it makes me feel a lot better about including one-ofs with generally a 30 card deck. I don't know why I have a really hard time with one-ofs in Lord of the Rings most of the time, unless it's like a unique ally that I don't really need to see.
Yeah, well, it also helps that you have a 30 card deck instead of a 50 card deck, and it also helps that if you want to draw cards, you can just do it.
Yeah.
Right? So if you want to just dig for the card that you need, you could just spend all day doing it. It's not, maybe the best idea all the time, but it can be.
Oh, I've done it though.
Oh, yeah.
You act like that stops me.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that if you're including a copy of a card, since you're spending experience in new cards, we wanted to make sure that if you were spending experience on a copy of a card, you were going to see it reliably enough to feel like that was worth your investment.
Right.
Although the more experience pips on a card, it's been proven scientifically, the heavier it is, and it goes to the bottom of your deck.
Right.
That's how deck shuffling works. Is the heavier the card, the further it slides down.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Jazz is made of like depleted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's always the
Poor
last
Jazz.
4 cards.
He gets the
Jazz.
heat. He gets the brunt of everyone's anger.
So while we're talking about random things here, so the spirit trait I've been noticing popping up on various things here and there. I haven't yet really figured out exactly what exactly ties them together. But I did notice that it is on Stand Together, and in Stand Together there appears to be an actual spirit
Right.
in the art. What's the story with that? Because I think that spirit has popped up, I think, like 2 times in the game.
So actually, that art's funny. That's a point where I'm a little embarrassed. So the spirit trait doesn't have anything to do with ghosts per se. It's more like your spirit, your willpower, right? Like you're a spirited person, and that's why you're able to do these things. And that's why it usually appears on things where you're like gritting your teeth and kicking butt. But that particular card, when I first saw the art, I didn't realize she was a ghost.
No.
I thought it was a lady, and I thought they were working together. And I noticed it before it went to print. It wasn't like completely over my head. And when I did,
You saw it when you opened the pack.
no. No, someone pointed it out to me. Like, she's see-through, and I was like, oh yeah, she is. And I just kind of rolled with it because I thought it was still cool. It still fits the theme.
Yeah.
It's still standing together. But it actually led to a funny joke where Nate said, "Oh, you should make it so that when you play this card, the other investigator that you choose is a ghost."
That sounds like something Nate would say.
Like, Nate, what does that even mean?
Okay, so that art though did make me wonder. Like, is there an investigator I don't know about whose story?
Oh,
is
God,
that,
that'd
like,
be
they have
amazing.
a ghost companion,
or just there's an investigator who is a ghost.
or who is a ghost?
Yeah.
I'd be totally fine with that.
That'd be great. But no, that was not the
Like, you may not hold any item assets, but you have, you can't take physical damage or something like that.
Now, I think this art, I don't know if it originally came from Eldritch Horror, but in Eldritch Horror, it's a spell, or maybe it's in Mansions. It's a spell that, I think it's called Intervene, or something like that. But yeah, it's just cool.
I honestly, because I think that card was spoiled before we even got the core set, or maybe it was like right after we got the core set. So I honestly thought it was like something that had to do with the story of Dunwich. I was like, what? Like, is there going to be like an apparition that we have to summon or something? But no, yeah, it's still really cool art.
Yeah.
But I was totally misled because I didn't know what to expect at that point.
Yeah, this was in Essex, so I feel like it was spoiled
Yeah.
prior to.
I think it was right before Arkham Knights.
I think I won't be able to today.
Yeah, the player cards rarely have anything to do with the story, for a couple different reasons. One, because we want to allow the player cards to tell all kinds of different stories and not like hammer them into what we're working on right now, and two, because sometimes we don't commission the art for the player cards at the same time as the encounter cards. We usually do them in 2 separate batches. So sometimes we don't have the story outline for the cycle like done yet by the time we're doing the player cards.
Right.
So yeah, that's just good to know. If you ever see a player card, sometimes it will be connected to the story just because I have the opportunity to do that, and I think it's cool.
Like scrying.
Like scrying. That's a great
scrying.
example. Yeah, or like sometimes there's overarching themes. Like in Carcosa, there's this theme of like wealth,
Madness.
and
Opulence.
Paris and opulence. Yeah, and the things that popped up in the King in Yellow, and some of those things you can see a little bit.
Yeah, because there's something about all the characters in King in Yellow where they're all kind of well-to-do. They're all pretty erudite.
Right. Yeah,
and yeah, there's not a whole lot of like working class characters, and I can't even think of any. Like maybe the model who's working with the artist, but she's kind of got a sugar daddy thing going on anyway. So
and there's also some cards too that I'll pick them based on the investigator. Mm-hmm. So like Trench Knife is surely in there because Mark is in there,
right?
And I think there's another card in the cycle that's very Markish.
Yeah.
Is it Mark?
No, but when you see it, you're gonna laugh.
Okay. Is it a trench shovel?
You'll see.
So since we kind of started talking about like the background story about the development, that sort of thing, is there? Okay, Google.
Is that actually what it was?
Oh shoot! I just activated my phone. Stop it!
Oh, jeez.
Is there a beat, a story, a piece of flavor text, anything that you would like to call to people's attention just because you're proud of it?
Other than the next scenarios.
Right. The next scenario is open for sure. You're not going to be able to miss that though.
Or even on a player card.
You don't know how we read the setup.
So all throughout the Unspeakable Oath, I'm pretty. Hopefully everyone else likes it too, because I'm pretty proud of the story text in Unspeakable Oath in general. Almost every sentence in the intro text, and many of the sentences on the flavor text and some of the encounter cards can be interpreted in multiple different ways.
There was one thing that I caught in playing that where I was like, what does that mean? Could this mean... I'll discuss it with you after we get off the air here. But,
yeah. I'm particularly happy with the straitjacket card.
Yes, God, the freaking straitjacket.
Yeah, because we had that art too. That was existing art, and I was thinking this has to be a card. It has to be a card. It can't not be a card. But thinking of how to implement it in terms of the story, because I'm very mindful of when a treachery happens to you. It's got to be something where I could see that happening. But I shut that part of my brain off when I designed some of the Carcosa cycle cards, because I wanted people to say,
you wanted people what
like how
yeah
now I'm wearing this, and I wanted them to question like, how did this happen without my knowing?
Well, right, and
did someone come over and just put it
They
on
just
me?
popped a
Some of the
straitjacket on me.
Suddenly straitjacket.
Yeah.
Suddenly straitjacket.
Suddenly
Surprise
straitjacket.
sneak attack straitjacket. Because a lot of the well, okay, we're not going to get too spoiler here, but
sorry if that was too much.
I still haven't played it, so...
No, I mean, just a lot of the flavor text kind of gives you the feeling that everything's kind of desolate and abandoned, so all of a sudden...
Oh, yeah.
Sneak attack... Like, I just imagine there's, like, catapults with straitjacket straps, just, like, launching them at the doors as you walk in.
Yeah,
They're hanging from the ceiling, just waiting to drop.
I like to think of it like you ever have a dream?
Yes.
Where
No.
the dream logic makes sense, but once you wake up...
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
That's anytime you explain any nightmare to someone,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
realize halfway through that you're an idiot. Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'm not a bear.
raccoons, and let me tell you, the raccoons, they had the teeth, and the person
And
who
you
was
were
listening-
there,
yeah,
but you didn't
were
look
there,
like
and
you, so
were
that was
there.
weird.
And I was in my childhood home, but it was a castle.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
For some reason, we were being assailed by robot minions. Dreams are weird.
Yeah, so that's kind of the connotation.
So
Yeah.
there's some very deliberate ambiguity to how certain things happen. And
Yeah, and I could see 3 or 4, reasonable people coming up with completely different, their logic behind what's going on. And I think a lot of it should depend on whether they've been taking the conviction path or the doubt path. Because the conviction path obviously represents, I believe all of this is happening and is real. And I'm aware that you feel very much like you're in the right. And when you're going through the doubt path, you get a very different feeling. And that should hopefully come more into fruition in the next scenario. So
Yeah, I feel like already every location we've been to, especially the asylum, but everything, like even the theater or the dinner party where there's like rotting food and people are just chilling, like, oh, no problems here. Like, I feel like every location has had that feeling like of, am I actually here? Is it like one of my favorite top 3 TV shows is Mr. Robot? So that, without spoiling too much about that TV show, that has that same flavor of like, wait, is they actually there at that location, or is this something else, or is everyone else seeing these things that I'm seeing?
what is real?
It's interesting because in my 2-player game with my wife, I'm letting her make all of the story decisions, and all that. So we actually have 6 doubt racked up. We're only on scenario 2. I don't know how we got to 6, but we got a lot of doubt going on right now.
Wait, is that possible?
I don't think that's
No,
possible.
I was being facetious, but we do it like we have all points in doubt and no points in conviction.
Yeah, I will have to probably deliberately, because I so far have been role-playing those decisions, and kind of it's been pretty clear, depending on who I've been running through, which path they would go on, who would question it, who wouldn't. I'm probably going to have to deliberately make one where I kind of run the middle path and see how that rolls.
Yeah. I'm very interested to see how it shakes out for everyone in the end in terms of how much doubt and how much conviction, or how much of either that they have. Because it does change things quite a bit. Yeah, that should be interesting.
So, since I know I leave for one episode, Tentacle Time turns into a half-hour affair.
Oh, come on!
So,
It was fun. The people liked it.
so let's move it on into a little bit of Tentacle Time. Matt, what you playing nowadays?
So, let me preface this by saying this game is not for everyone. But I recently was introduced to a game on Steam called Doki Doki Literature Club.
Go on.
Definitely sounds polarizing.
Let me give you the little backstory here. Anyone who wants to go through this game blind should, but you should not if you have any issues with like anxiety or depression or anything like that. It is terrifying. And the craziest part about this game is it looks like a kind of moe dating sim.
Yeah, I was about to say
sim.
this looks super cheery.
And so if you look at the tags on Steam, it's visual novel, anime, free to play, cute, dating sim, horror, psychological horror, dark, violent,
gore,
and you're like, what? And so one of my friends, Brad, coworker, showed me the tags. And he said, "Have you heard anything about this game?" And I'm like, "No, I'm playing it." It is very disturbing, to say the least. So that's a thing.
What's kind of the premise of it? Is it kind of like a dating? Holy cow! There's like 30,000 reviews and it's got like 5 stars.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're into this kind of thing, it's a good game.
I don't even know. I shouldn't have brought it up. It's not for everyone. It's really not for everyone.
I just did a quick image search, and this was one of the images that came up. I have no idea what it's in reference to, but I laughed.
I get it.
Okay, good.
So,
I'm glad you do, because I don't.
Yeah. So anyway,
you need to internet more, Nick.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone, but if you're a fan of psychological horror and just getting completely your mind blown, it's worth playing through. It's very short, just a couple hours, really, and it will destroy you.
Interesting.
Anyway, I only brought it up because I played it very recently and it affected me. But I'm also playing. I'm playing. Let's see, what am I playing?
Oh, it is free. All right.
Yeah, it's free. It's not even much of a game, really. It's more of a click through the story kind of thing. I'm playing the new Guild Wars 2 expansion.
Okay.
Because it's amazing.
Oh.
I love Guild Wars 2. It's probably my favorite game. And Destiny, of course, has a new update soon, Destiny 2. So I've been playing a lot of that too. I like games that update. Obviously, it sounds silly coming from me, but that really is like I love games.
Episodic content.
Yeah, episodic content. Guild Wars 2 does that very naturally, where they have a season with episodes, almost like a TV show. And they just released episode 1 of season 4, and it's like bonkers good. It's like the best episode they've ever done. So I'm like, I've just been playing that every night. Yeah, that's about it.
That's it?
I mean, yeah, pretty much.
You reading anything right now?
He's making our favorite game.
That too. I actually am reading something.
Yeah, but we want to know what his mind fuel is right now. That's the point.
I'm reading a book called "This Book is Filled with Spiders." Seriously, don't touch it. It's actually book 2 of a series that starts with John dies at the end.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so John dies at the end is the first one. It's actually on Netflix and Hulu. It's a movie now. The movie version is quite good. But book 2 is even better. It's like ridiculous. And it is literally just called that. The third one is coming out soon. I actually think it might already be out. The third one is called What the Hell Did I Just Read?
Which is what I've heard from everyone who reads John Dies at the end.
It's great. Yeah. It's perfect. So
what's kind of the basic premise of them?
John dies.
Yes, this book
Not till the end, though.
The basic premise is there's this drug that causes you to see things that are actually there, but like no one else can perceive them, like horror things. And it deals with, and it's just goofy. It's so goofy. There's a talking bratwurst. There's like his friend John is at one point a dog. There's an alien invasion. A girl has a phantom limb, like her arm is cut off or whatever. But like the phantom limb, like she still feels pain. But in this, it's actually
like a
a
phantom
ghost
pain.
limb. Like, it's just so goofy and off the wall.
That sounds like my kind of anachronism.
You can't help but love it. It's so much fun. And the style that it's written from the perspective of the main character, first person, him talking to you, like conveying this information, like you need to know it. And like it's so tongue-in-cheek. Like the back of the book text for both of them are just, and remember, none of this is my fault. That kind of thing. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Interesting. Did you see Ragnarok yet?
I did. Oh, Ragnarok was great. I loved Ragnarok.
Dude, Ragnarok might be my favorite Marvel movie to date.
It was really good. I didn't expect it to. I expected to like it, but I didn't expect it to love it.
Yeah, Nick, did you see it yet?
No, I haven't.
Dude,
but
it just like it harkens back to a time when movies just had fun, and that is the highest priority of that movie.
I think I liked it as much as the original Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, see, Guardians.
You cut out. I'm sorry. Much as the original what? Guardians?
Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, here's my thing, and I'm not trying to throw shade on Thor because like
you haven't
Thor
seen
Ragnarok.
It, so.
Well, Thor Ragnarok I hear is amazing, and I don't doubt that. But here's everything. Here's the most like believable review that I've heard so far. Not that you guys are unbelievable, but well, you are unbelievable. So that's different. Thor Ragnarok. Like now, Marvel has perfected that 70% comedy, 30% action with just a little bit of drama thrown in there. They perfected that formula that now they're stapling it onto everything that didn't really hit home originally. And Thor is one of those series. Like Thor 1 was good, but it wasn't great. Thor 2, kind of the same. So with
Thor 1.
Well,
Thor 2
well, that's what I mean.
Forgettable though.
Sure.
But they weren't top tier Marvel movies. And they didn't outperform the others at the box office.
Sure.
Like they were admirable, but they weren't amazing. So that's what they did with Thor. Is they took that Guardians formula, that mainly comedy with a lot of action and some drama, and now they're putting it on everything that they're either unsure about or that they need to sort of quote unquote redeem. I know that's a bad word, but you get what I'm saying.
I could see that argument. I think that's probably even correct, but I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing.
No, and I don't either. But
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say my favorite style of Marvel movie is still like The Winter Soldier. It's that where the story and the intrigue and all that, like where it feels. I think that's just why. I mean, I love the Captain America series because there's so much more of like an action movie about a superhero and not so much like this comedy.
Jack Ryan,
/
the
action.
first Avenger.
I do think Winter Soldier is my favorite Marvel movie.
Oh, really? Yeah, that one is really good.
Me and Caleb both really love Winter Soldier.
It's so good.
I think it's important, like as a movie, more so than just like a superhero movie.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it has like an actual message, which I think is good. What I like about Thor Ragnarok is it gives me the sense that Thor is growing up as a character, growing down as a character. It's almost like the rest of the Avengers have rubbed off on him.
Right.
That's like the sense that I got from the movie, and he's just he's so much fun in this movie.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And they definitely did dial the silliness up, but I feel like even from scene 1 of the first Thor, like part of what Branagh did with that movie was part of how Thor works is you kind of take the piss out of the seriousness a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
where he just
gets stabbed in the ass with sedative.
And that's honestly that's how that movie needed to be for it to fit into the Marvel universe and for people to accept it on like an audience level. Like that's how it needed to be. And I'm not saying that the silliness is a bad thing. I don't feel that way at all. I prefer the style of movie that is more in line with Winter Soldier or Iron Man 3 or kind of Civil War, like those over. Like Guardians is still really good. I still think Guardians is one of the best Marvel movies. But if it came down to let's watch Guardians or let's watch Winter Soldier, I'll pick Winter Soldier every time.
Yeah, I think they're just in a tough place because we've hit such a point of saturation with superhero movies. If you do the whole global threat, enemies team up, or heroes team up, heroes eventually prevail, maybe someone dies. Like, if you follow that formula, it's just going to get so stale. Like, my wife, who is, she enjoys this stuff to a fair degree for someone who's not, quote-unquote, a nerd. But she just was not that interested in Civil War by the time we hit it. Like, she liked the Spider-Man bit, but she's like, everything else, we've just seen it before.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get that the place that they're in where they have to throw something new into the format each time just to keep it interesting, but I don't know, man.
Infinity
Ragnarok
War
was
looks
so
awesome.
good. It's got like that spirit of the like 80s movies where
Oh, yeah.
where it's super anachronistic. Like swear to God, like even when they're on the junk planet, which is kind of where the majority of the movie takes place. Like even the soundtrack feels like the first Mass Effect soundtrack, where it's all just kind of
kinda does,
beeps
yeah.
and boops,
Yeah.
and it just gives it a really cool flavor.
You said
I was
beeps and boops,
surprised
it
to
made me
see
think of, Rick and Morty, human music.
Jeez. I was surprised to see that they went that route, like artistically speaking, that they went, okay, now we're gonna 80s it up. And I was like, that's interesting that they did that, because Guardians obviously has a thematic tie-in for why it's connected to the music and everything that's in that movie. But, and I haven't seen Ragnarok, so I don't know, but is there like a connection to 80s Earth pop culture?
No, not really.
In Ragnarok?
It's
They don't
more
earn it like Guardians does. but
right,
it's still
right.
good.
Well, and it's not necessarily like American or the U.S. or even Earth 80s pop culture. It's more just like the junk world and kind of the feeling you get from that kind of is evocative
Gotcha.
of the tone of 80s sci-fi movies.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
That's right.
Well, that's fair. That's
Except for
And
the
I
fact
wouldn't
that
be
there are...
surprised if a producer or an executive at some point looked at Stranger Things and said, "I want more of that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Oh, yeah, that's another thing, too. Oh, man.
But yeah,
Remember
but
when
it's
the
not
80s
like,
were good?
It's not like there's nothing in the movie that's a microcosm of 80s.
Right.
culture
Except for the
or
fact
Sure.
that the immigrant song plays in like three separate occasions.
because it fits.
It's so amazing. It's one of my favorite Zeppelin songs,
Well, and
so
the
I'm not going
lyrics
to
fit
complain.
perfectly, like with. I mean, I don't know.
Oh yeah, well
It works so-
it's all about Viking conquest,
exactly,
so it
yeah.
totally works. Anyway.
But at the same time, you don't want to go the Zack Snyder route and just make a big music video. Like you wanna approach it a little more delicately than that.
Well, he's got to fill the time with all that slow mo.
Oh,
I recently also saw Wonder Woman, and it was very good. But the whole time
like
I'm like
Wonder
going,
Woman.
"Oh man, this smells so much like Zack Snyder."
see, Wonder Woman, I think was like heads and shoulders above the rest of the DC.
Oh, 100%
It was,
agree.
yeah, absolutely. I like
'Cause, like-
Wonder Woman a lot.
I got through Batman v Superman, and I didn't like it. And then everyone's telling me, watch the extended cut, it's better. And I'm like, why would I want to watch more? Like, I don't care if it's good. I saw what I needed to see.
I feel like we said what was needing to be said.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry to hijack your tentacle time.
Well, that's how technical time works, yo. Now, Ian, I know you and I had wanted to potentially touch on the LOTR FAQ, but we might have to save that for one more time. Because I don't know that Matt's going to want to comment a whole lot on that.
I think that's probably also a bigger discussion that's going to take a lot of tentacle time. In tentacle time, so yeah. we'll keep that on the back burner.
So what you got going on, Ian?
Well, I got my copy of Legacy of Dragonholt yesterday, so
It's so good, everyone. Get it.
What is
Agreed.
it? I've heard so many people talk about
yes.
it. I'm
So there's been a lot of
So it's-
questions about it, so I'll give my short mini review. So, because a lot of people have been like, well, is it just like a glorified choose your adventure? So it definitely choose your adventure is kind of in the DNA. Like the core of the game is you're running through reading passages, making choices, and going to other passages. But I played it with Melissa, my fiance, last night, just the 2-player game, and we had so much fun with it. So first you go through creating your character and kind of deciding your backstory, which doesn't have a mechanical purpose. It's just deciding like how is that going to influence what choices you make. And then you also pick from a pool of skills, and then you go forth making decisions. Kind of what adds the interesting flavor to it is as you make decisions, you kind of mark little story points which get referenced later. So if you make a decision at one point, that might influence what decisions you're able to make later. And then also what skills you have. Like if you have archery skill, you're able to make this choice and like shoot at the people coming at you. But if you don't, you're not able to. So there's no dice rolling. There's no kind of like random skill check element to that. It's just, do you have the skill or not? I feel like the game is really hard to describe, but it's just like such a fun experience going through like creating these characters together. It's like a perfect product for someone who's like hasn't played role-playing games before, doesn't have a dungeon master available, like it's basically giving you that experience. We were sitting down on a couch and playing it together. Like, it's a very small footprint, so it's just something you can get together with someone and play and give them that experience. And like, it is something you can run solo and I think would be enjoyable, but I feel like playing it with at least one other person, I think it's actually a really good 2-player experience. You can just have that fun of like making jokes about what's happening and like creating your own dialogue of how you're responding to the characters. Like, I think it's definitely a game that the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. So for players who are very like mechanical based, like, oh, I want a very strategic like dungeon crawl game, this is not that. This is literally like a role-playing game in a box without a DM. And that's pretty much what you should expect. As for replay value, like, I don't think you're going to be able to play it like a billion times, but I think you can play it through several times with different characters. And for me, I was really happy with what you get for the money. Like, they give you cool props that go along with the story, like a letter and a journal and stuff like that. So yeah,
I will say you can definitely play through it at least 4 or 5 times and take pretty wildly different routes through, especially like when you're in town, there's so much to do.
Oh,
you're never gonna see everything you play through.
Yeah, there's different booklets for the different quests, and then you get to the town booklet and it's like a tome. Like, it's big.
It's like by far the largest.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it's kind of RPG light is essentially.
I wouldn't even necessarily call it RPG light. It's more like an RPG where you have a set number of choices.
Okay.
Instead of literally whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Which obviously is necessary for a game that doesn't have a game master.
Right.
But the choices that you have, like, you very rarely playing through and thinking, oh, I wish I could have done this. You almost always have like a choice for every possible, not a choice for every possible skill, but every skill that makes sense in that particular scenario. If you're like sneaking up on a camp of bandits or something, you'll have like 4 or 5 choices, and they all make sense. And very rarely are you like, oh, I wish I could have done this.
Set fire to the tents. Set fire to the tents.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I recommend.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Just preparing for the Fellowship event for Lord of the Rings, which is next weekend for, I think, everyone, right?
You're going to be there? You're going to be at the Fellowship event, Matt?
I think so.
So anyone in the Twin Cities who also plays Lord of the Rings? Yeah.
I don't think I'll be running it, but I think I will just drop by.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just a couple weeks later, or a couple weeks from now, we have the Invocation.
Yeah, it's the next weekend is the Invocation event.
That's
which
gonna be fun.
I assume you'll be there. I assumed you'd be there for that one.
I will be there for that. It's not like a set scenario that we're running, although I think I will try to get some labyrinths going.
Sure.
But I had an idea for what I want to do with the Invocation.
Oh, we should do our ultimatums of everything that weekend.
The ultimatum of all ultimatums. With the special play with the developer ultimatum. I'm just kidding. That's not actually one of them.
He's going to show up with a custom printed card that says.
I want to get people to play Carnivale because I just love that scenario so much still. But
yeah, that one I've only played once in 4 players.
Yeah, I've only played it solo in 2 players. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of fun to play 4 players.
Yeah. For Lord of the Rings, usually Fellowship events, I just bring decks and everyone brings decks, and we just kind of go at it. But for this one, because I know what we're up against, like our group has actually got together and have us our little group messaging on Discord, and we are like hardcore planning out decks. So that's actually been a fun process to like.
I need to get on that.
We are like power gaming the power game. Like, how much cheese can we build into these decks?
Well, you need to, especially in the post-Errata world where Caldara and Boromir are not quite the options that they were before. Like, Ian, you and I finally beat that scenario together, non-epic 2-player. And now that has a giant asterisk on it because I was playing, aggro Boromir.
Yeah, the deck I'm probably going to run, I'm not sure because we're still deciding on who's going to run what, but the one I built is like a Tactics Aragorn with Rohirrim and Gondorian Fire, so he's just going to try to smash things as soon as he engages. And then Éomer with Leadership Éomer with all his tools, so it's just trying to kill things before they can kill us.
Is your last hero Amarthul or Elfhelm?
It is Elfhelm because all the mounts.
The mounts.
Love it.
See. I love Elfhelm so much. I love Elfhelm so much. Yeah. And for my part, I know Matt has to get rolling here, so I'll keep mine pretty short. Been playing more Overwatch.
Do I not get a tentacle this week?
Oh yeah, sorry, Nick. You go ahead. I'll skip me this week.
No, it's fine. I'll keep mine very short too, because my tentacle time has been inundated with cards. I have been working hard to get a playtest version of our custom campaign group. We're calling ourselves Creative License. I'm working hard to get... I love that little title. I'm working hard to get our first scenario into playtesting formats that our group can playtest it a few times, work out some kinks, and then send it out to people who have volunteered to playtest the campaign as well. So that's really exciting to see those cards coming together.
Nice.
I have also been working on scenario 3 here and there of my own campaign, which that has actually gone pretty quick because I already had a lot of the details kind of drafted up. I just didn't have them in card form. So I've gotten that to the playtest table a couple times, and I'm very happy with how that's looking.
Nice.
So I'm excited to progress that as well.
Nick, I can't remember. Are you going to be making it to the Invocation event?
No,
Okay.
I had from Gen Con up until end of October. I had so many trips down to the cities and all that that I'm like, I'm gonna just stay in Brainerd for the holidays and then not do anything until our next gaming weekend.
Valid.
So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Just Arkham custom scenarios is kind of what's been eating up my time the last couple weeks.
You know, I've gotten heavily back into Overwatch despite the salt levels it gives me because I made the mistake last season of letting my 10-year-old daughter play on competitive because she wanted to, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to stifle that. So yeah, go ahead. I don't care about competitive. But it turns out that placement for the next season is heavily affected by where you ended last season.
It's partially affected. It's not heavily affected.
I had really good placement matches, and I still ended up in low bronze. So,
Well, get good.
and I can't claw my way out, and it's infuriating. So I've just gotten to a point where so I'm almost to the point where I can buy a gold weapon with my competitive points, and once I get to that one gold weapon, I'm just kind of done with competitive for a while because I get really angry when we're playing. Yeah, well, when we're playing competitive and we have an attacking Widowmaker and Hanzo, and no one will choose a tank, and I'm the only healer. And it's like, guys, what are we doing here?
Welcome to ranked team games.
Yeah. So
Well,
anyway.
on tanks, they still define the meta so much in that game.
Yeah,
The perfect team comp is still 3 tanks, 2 support, and 1 flex.
The best thing that Blizzard could do for the casual competitive game right now is make Hanzo a tank. That would solve so many of my goddamn problems.
Triple his health, and that's it.
Whatever works. Just anything to get those players who just pick Hanzo no matter what every time. Anyway, and then
You gotta play more arcade.
yeah, well, that's what I've been doing. And then I've also started, like I said, Life is Strange, which has been a fun ride so far. It's been a long time since I've played a really, really narratively driven game like that. And from everyone I've heard, apparently the ending is mind blowing. So I'm excited to get
It's
there.
really good.
So yeah, I think that's probably gonna wrap us up for this. Matt, any parting shots? You want to give us any more teasers? Anything else to?
No, just I'm really excited for the future of the game. Looks super healthy. We've got a lot more announcements in the pipeline, so keep an eye on the website. Yeah, everything that I'm working on right now, I'm super excited for.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when can we expect Anna Stanley?
Who?
There it is.
I'll just keep saying who every time
2023.
I know it's become our thing now. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Always a pleasure, of course.
Yeah, thank you for the invite.
Yeah, so I think that's probably going to wrap us up for episode 29 of Mythos Busters. Oh man, we're going to hit that 3-0
What's
next
that?
time.
Woohoo.
29. I don't know.
That's not a thing. Don't do that.
Oh no, now this very second it just became a thing. All right.
You're making the interns in the office all scared, Sean.
Not the first time I've heard that.
Oh,
So thank you for joining us on episode 29 of Mythos Busters.
Oh, God.
We'll see you guys next time. Well, and I think you're like
Checks out.
I have no discrimination against any like Mountain Dew like taste-alikes, right? Like I'll drink Mellow Yellow, I don't care. I'm sure
Gross.
you're a little bit more discerning.
Mellow Yellow tastes like feet.
Yep, there you go. See, I don't think Mellow Yellow is that bad. Like I will admit that I prefer Mountain Dew.
I
Well,
like
we've
Mellow
shown
Yellow.
before that you're wrong. Ian, don't get on his side.
Ian's always got my back.
Ian's got everybody's back.
That's true.
Ian's a textbook people pleaser.
He pleases them textbook people.
yeah. That's my job description.
Hang on. I was about to say, hang on, Nick. Ian, don't you actually write curriculum for a living?
I do. So I'm a textbook.
Oh my god. We have our cold open.